Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. This is part 2 of my plaster box making videos. I shot a video where I made the molds for these boxes and showed how to do some carving. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to go about finishing your plaster. Now, I did do a basics video on spray paint. If you are unfamiliar with different types of spray paint, you should definitely go check out that video. You want to make sure that the plaster is fully dry before you do put anything on it at all. If you do not wait for it to fully dry, any of that moisture can get trapped inside, and over time, it will break apart your plaster. And you can tell by feeling it. If it feels like it's cold and damp, then it's have not been drying long enough. It feels kind of chalky, it's probably pretty dry. This one is kind of really nice looking with the white plaster. It has an ancient kind of feel to it already. And maybe you want to retain the look of the plaster and keep it white. But the problem is that regardless of the type of plaster that you're using, most of it over time is not going to be able to stand up to weathering, especially if you live in an area that has a lot of moisture. So you need to finish it with something, even if that is just a clear coat. These are two of the clear coats that I rely on for the majority of my project. This is triple thick clear coat that Rust-Oleum makes it. I believe I've seen this made by another brand as well. They do sell a version of this at the craft store. I'm going to tell you this. The one that I saw at the craft store is half the size and double the price. And I have not found any difference between that triple thick and the triple thick that you get at the Home Depot. This also works well not only for plaster but also for ceramics. It'll apply a very thick layer of glaze that'll be high gloss, and it'll look like you ran it through a kiln with a ceramic type of glaze on it. You can apply this directly on your plaster as is without having painted it up, or this can be the top coat on top of acrylic paints or other spray paints that you have applied to the piece. This is a very high gloss finish. So maybe you just want to seal your piece, but you want to keep that matte look about it. You could also purchase this matte clear enamel. If you put too much of it on there, it can start to sheen out. There is another option. You can just paint the thing with some white school glue and it will seal it. That is not a long-term solution. That white school glue I don't think is going to stand up as long as something like one of your spray paints will. The white school glue is susceptible to water, and if you're going to use these containers for anything food purpose wise, the white school glue may begin to break down from the oils of the food. Once these are fully dried and saturated, I would still wrap up whatever cookie or goodie you're going to be putting in these boxes in like a cellophane or something else before you place it in here. None of these finishes are going to be completely waterproof. You would not be able to take your piece and run it through a dishwasher. It's not going to be that kind of a finish. You could take a damp cloth once you've sprayed these on and it's fully cured and wipe your piece down with the damp cloth for cleaning, but this is not something you're going to throw in your kitchen sink to wash when you do the dishes. For my boxes, I'm going to be applying the spray paint on, and then I'm going to do a carve through on this side that I left so that you could see what that looks like in two-tone effect. But for the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead and spray paint this guy blue, and then I'm going to go ahead and spray paint this guy white. It got really dusty here, so the first thing you probably want to do is just to dust it off a little bit. Take a paper towel and try and dust off. All right, I'm going to give that some time to dry. It is flat, so because I'm spraying on a flat finish, I will know when it's dry when the glossy sheen of the wet paint goes away. Plaster is an incredibly porous material. If you went in and tried to paint these up with straight up acrylic without giving them this base coat, it's going to absorb a ton of acrylic paint. You're going to get a really uneven finish and it's going to take forever. So regardless of what my end result is going to be, when I have a piece that's made out of plaster, I always hit it with a base coat of something. Always be sure that you are spray painting in a well-ventilated area. So I'm going to wait for at least an hour for my pieces to dry before I come back in and begin painting with acrylic. That is after I have rotated them all and given them their full coat. The spray paint has dried on my pieces, and I'm going to do two different techniques. This one we're going to do a dry brushing technique. Now that all of my spray paint is dried, you can come in with your acrylic paints and paint them up any which way you choose. For the dry brushing method, you want to have a very stiff bristled brush. Most of the cheap ones that you get that are made out of plastic will be stiff like this. Another type of bristled brush would be something that was meant for stenciling. And you also want to make sure that your brush is fully dry. Dry brushing, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're going to be dipping your brush in a little bit of paint and then drying off the brush. So I'm going to just use some of this green. We'll go over this tree. And you want to put a little bit of paint on your brush, and then you want to have either some newspaper, or here I have this cardboard that I'm working on, and you're going to just clear off the paint so that you end up with pretty much a dry brush loaded up with some color. And then I'm just going to come at an angle. This works really well on texture. If you are just going to be painting large fields of color, I could just take a brush and go over the tree on my own. Now, if you don't have a palette, you can see an easy way to have a makeshift palette here is just to shake up your colors and then use a little bit of paint residue that sits in the top of the lid. So if you have large fields like this, you can just use a regular brush to come in and paint up your areas. But the texture areas are the areas that I really recommend using that dry brush technique. I'm going to just get some color on here on the tree first, and then I'm going to go in and show you how to dry brush the texture. Now, I will say this, you want to make sure that when you do your dry brushing that any acrylic paint that you've put on is fully dry on the surface. So we're going to wait for this green on this tree to dry before I come in and do the dry brushing. I do have a little bit of texture on this lid. Don't pay attention to my shoddy job of spray painting the underside. I just sprayed this up so that I could get the demo done. I'll go with this mustard. Now I'm just gonna plop a bit on my board. Do the same thing, take a bit in, remove what I can. Now layering on this yellow over my blue here, even though I didn't physically blend the two colors, because I'm dry brushing it on here, it has the illusion of a green tinge to it. You can see all the blue texture is still in there. Anywhere that I had the texture still brightly blue. And then the majority of my surface is that yellow. And if I continue to add more layers of this, the yellow will just keep brightening on up. So you can see the more I put on here, the brighter it becomes. And you can play with layering different colors. I can come in with a white, with, you know, other shades of yellow, maybe orange, whatever you want to do here. If you're going to be layering a lot, I would give 15-20 minutes in between each round of layering for it to fully dry, and then you can come in and add some more. That's a cool graphic. Even though this looks dry, it's definitely not dry, so you want to go to a new area or change out your paper. Too much paint. So what happens if you have too much paint on it? It starts looking like you're actually painting rather than doing this dry brushing technique. So you may have to clear off some of your paint. I'm okay with this green tree being dusted with this white. It's just going to look like snow. All right, that's about all I'm going to do with the painting on this guy. I am going to carve into the area that I painted up blue just so you can see the two-tone effect. Okay, I'm just going to start out by drawing out what I want to put on here, and let's do a snowman. Okay, so I got my 3 circles there. I'm going to squish my lead back in. This is a mechanical pencil, and then I can come in. It's a little bit harder because my plaster is now dry. It's definitely kicking up a lot more dust. You're going to be doing a lot of this. You probably want to be wearing a mask. All right, so there's carving through. Once you've painted a layer and you get this two-tone white effect, you can just take a damp cloth and it'll pick up any of the dust. As long as your paint is fully dry, you're not going to mess up the paint. For this guy, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this with a black acrylic. So I have this metallic luster. You could do this with a metallic acrylic paint. I'm going to apply this the dry brushing method. I am going to go over that first box with triple thick clear spray coat, so it'll make it look like it was a fired ceramic. Because I'm trying to keep an aged look on this, we're going to keep this one matte. I'm going to rely on the coating spray paint to be my sealer. I don't need to necessarily go over it with that clear top coat. I would if I was just using straight up acrylics, but this luster, so minimal of an amount on here that I don't need to do that. Okay, that part of it is dry. So I'm just taking an ivory and I'm going to come in and dry brush this ivory. This cameo part, I am going to hit with that triple thick glaze. I want this to be shiny. It would have been made out of an actual ivory. I have this clay demo that I'm just going to use to show you some of these items before I start applying anything to this box. This stuff is graphite. It's usually sold in artist stores. It's just ground up pencil in powder form. This graphite, as well as this charcoal, these powdered forms can be rubbed into your pieces to give an aged look to it, but they require you to put a top coat of either the matte sealer or the clear sealer in order for them to stay on long term. So it's okay if you're going to use these straight up on a sculptural piece. You don't want to put them onto a piece that is going to come in contact with food or people are going to be handling if it doesn't have some kind of sealer. I'll just show you what it does. I'm going to just take a finger of this stuff, and if I do it here in the texture, you just kind of need to a dusting of it. Got way too much on here, but you can just take a finger and rub it in. It's best to just have a small amount on your hand when you're applying this. So that's the graphite. This is charcoal that is sold as tooth polish, and this is going to do very similar to pencil aged look. It takes away that sheen. Shoe polish. Now you can get this at the 99-cent store. It usually comes, or the Dollar Tree, wherever you shop, usually comes in black and then brown because it's meant for shoes. It's a wax and it is water resistant. So in the case of the wax, you will not need to go and add sealer coats, but you want to make sure you do a good job of buffing this stuff on. And I'm just using a little tiny piece of old t-shirt material. You just rub that in here. I'm applying this in a large amount right now because I want you to be able to see it on camera. When you're applying it to your piece, you don't have to put this much. All right, I'm going to apply to my box. I'm not doing a lot. All right, I think that's good enough. I'm going to go ahead and get the cameo glued in with just the white school glue, the same way I glued the sides on. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and hope to see you soon.